There are a fair few versions of the Razer Abyssus, which could be confusing to newcomers, but there are only two main shells. There's the original, and the one now used with the V2. I've always been told that the original Abyssus had the better shape, but it was outdated and not available. Razer have now released the Dugan, Diva Abyssus Elite, and the Essential. They're all basically the same, and the shape is probably the most important factor here, so let's start with a tour. I'm reviewing the Diva Elite, which has a different logo and paint job. Here's a quick comparison next to the V2. I really like this old shape in a lot of ways, but there are a few issues. Look at them from the side, and see the line drawn across. That shows how high the buttons are. The V2 has the buttons that are lower, whereas the Diva is higher and flatter. I've mentioned this in reviews before, but in my opinion, to keep better leverage, and your hand in a more natural position, the buttons should be lower than this. So in my grip, the lowest point of my finger is about 2.3cm on the V2. On the Diva, it's about 2.7cm. It doesn't sound like much, but really I'd want my fingers at about 2cm like on the FK2. I would say it's because of three things. Your fingers being lower than your knuckles should allow for more click strength. It's a more natural position with your fingers being lower, and the closer your fingers are to the pad, the more control you'll probably have over the mouse. Obviously it depends on how you hold it, but that's just an example. Otherwise, I really like the comfort curves in the buttons. I like the overall shape, but I think it could do with some adjustments. I mean, I like this light on the base. It looks good, but you notice there's a ledge there. So the base is actually lower than the sides. I prefer my setup flat, giving full stability. This one, I feel like I can rock it too easily. I'm using more strength on the V2 here, but you can see I can't actually rock it. And that's why I think I messed up some rocket jumps, because it's not easy to put the mouse back down flat on the pad. It's the same issue on the back. It's too easy to rock backward. As you see compared to the V2 is a much more stable shape because of the base. I'm putting more force and I can't tilt it. Next is the sides. These look really good and I like how flat they are. You could call it a safe shape, but something feels slightly off, and I think it's because while it is creating a ledge for grip, it's actually shaped in a bulge, as you can see here with my thumb pressed against it. The V2 has a better shape on the sides as well. So I think the Abyssus V2 with the comfort curves of the original, and buttons a little lower, that could be an ideal shape. But of course I'm just being very picky here. I still really like the shape overall, and the size does suit me too, although I would prefer a little smaller. And once I adjusted, I started to play really well with it. The materials on the shell are just plastic, smooth on the sides, textured on top. It should actually be the other way around, but I gripped it fairly well anyway. Again, looking at the side, the button slope is too gradual, and the highest point is about 3.7cm. The width at the fingers is about 5.5, but of course that's sloped so not accurate. And the length is about 11.5cm. So this would be a small medium mouse, and whether or not it suits you really depends on how you hold it. Here it is next to some other mice so you get a general idea of the size. It feels a bit smaller than the V2, but they are very similar. My thumb placement feels most comfortable next to the sensor. Little finger slightly behind, ring finger ahead. And the only part of my palm that touches it is where I can reach with my thumb, and that's in fingertip grip. I think people with hands under 17cm could palm grip it. Claw grip I wouldn't recommend for those who rest their palm on the back hump, because that could cause the tilting. But for unrested palm claw grip, I think this would suit 16 to 20cm. Again, at either end of that measurement, you might experience some discomfort. And for fingertip grip, it feels pretty good in 18 by 9cm hands, so maybe 17 to 21. Now looking at build quality, here's a quick button check. Overall they all sound fairly consistent and good. Left and right have a bit of a snap to them, needing a fair bit of force. I didn't have any accidental clicks. The middle mouse button is harder to press in, and it is very low. The wheel has fairly tight steps, just a slight rattle when moving it quickly. When tapping it there's no extra sound, but when shaking it something is rattling. And it's not the mouse wheel. I'll get to that soon. The cable is a smooth rubber and it's fairly flexible. I barely thought about it while playing, which is good. The mouse is moving a fair bit still because it only weighs 78 grams, which is really light. If I pick it up, I can feel the weight balance a little behind the sensor, but it's close enough. In the latency testing, it seemed to perform a little worse than the Mamba Elite. I found it harder to get consistent low scores, but nothing too major. The software has the usual functions. You can alter the buttons, although there isn't much to use, other than changing the scroll wheel up and down. But you can use the usual like keyboard, mouse, and multimedia. In performance, you can set 5 DPI stages, from 200 to 7200, and that's in steps of 100. And of course the polling rate. It's an RGB mouse, so if you get the black editions, you can even set it to color cycle. But on the Diva, because it's colored already, I prefer to leave it on white. I think Razer software is getting a bit big these days, and requires updates a little too often, but it has good functionality and is easy to use. It has surface calibration too. As for the sensor, there's been some confusion as to what's actually in there, but I'm only really concerned with how it performs in my in-game testing. So it handles rocket jumping well, but the shape does cause me to make a few more mistakes than usual. I can't make it spin out even moving it as fast as I can. And it even seems to handle the tilt slam test, so holding it on an angle and then slamming it down fast. Many sensors will lose track, but it doesn't seem to be happening on this. Zooming in, it tracks pixel by pixel and it does it smoothly. Happy with this at 1600 DPI. I can't find any acceleration or deceleration. And on default, the liftoff distance is about 2 DVDs on cloth and hard pads, which might be a bit high for some people, but hopefully they can fix that with surface tuning. Overall, from my testing, it's an excellent sensor, and looking at the line test to confirm that, everything seems good, except the sensor or lens rattle. That's what seems to be making the noise on my copy, so maybe mine is defective. I've spoken to some other people and had mixed reports. Most say theirs is fine, others say they had the rattle. So if you get one that's defective, please leave a comment below so others can be warned. Thankfully, it didn't actually bother me in game. It's just something to be aware of, it can happen on these. In conclusion, I'm a bit torn on this one. In a lot of ways, I really like it. It's a fun small mouse, and once you get comfortable with it, it's really good for aim. Everything seems pretty good. I miss the side buttons a little, but for a gaming mouse just used for aim, it is good. I had a lot of great games with it. I think the V2 has a nicer shape, but the comfort curves in the buttons on this feel much better. Which one I'd choose? For me, I think the V2 has a better shape, but the weight and sensor are better on the Essential and Diva. So which is more important? It depends what you like. They're both good for what they are, and both could use some improvements, and maybe even modular side buttons. I think that'd make the top 10 if that were the case. For now, they're just fairly good small mice, and a lot of people swear by the original, so if that's your thing, that would be the recommendation. So I hope that helps. I'll leave the usual links in the description if you want to help support the channel. Special thanks to Razer for sending it out for review. And as always, subscribe, like and share this video, and I'll catch you in the next.
Two frags left. Lead taken. First place.